What is going on, folks? Hope everybody's having a wonderful Friday evening. The sun going down pretty soon. For those who keep the Sabbath, Shabbat Shalom to you. Let's get started on this one, guys, so I don't make this a long video. This is continuing on with Acts 10, Killing Eve, Acts 15, the Jerusalem Council, Galatians 2, 11 through 14, and various other scriptures that correlate with that. But those are the three that Yahweh's really had me working on for several years now. With that being said and done, first things first, remember Acts 17:11. Search the scriptures daily, folks, to see if what I'm telling you is true, or anyone who is a teacher of the Bible or comes up with a Bible to you and tries to tell you, hey, this is what you should be doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing, folks. No, be as in the Bereans, guys. They were eager to receive the word from the Apostle Paul, but they just didn't take his word at it. They did their due diligence in the fact that they searched the scriptures to see if what Paul was telling them is true. Now, with that being said and done, folks, let me start off. I'm going to start off first by bringing up two things, guys. The first thing I want to bring up is let's first start off, folks, with the definition for common sense. I'm saying that my stepdad, may he rest in peace. I miss him. Best stepdad that a guy like me could have, honestly. He preached common sense, boy. He was not the smartest guy as far as books are concerned, or Bible, that's for sure he was not. However, though, when it came to common sense, boy, he could preach a sermon, and he would go. He preached the gospel of common sense, and that's what he was. May rest in peace again. I'm thankful that even though I didn't take all of it in, but again, I'm still thankful for what I did get from, as far as always getting jumped on about common sense. The definition for common sense, guys, it's very simple. We'll go to the Merriam-Webster's dictionary. And it's only appropriate that the definition of common sense should be something pretty simple, and it is. Folks, common sense is defined by Merriam-Webster's dictionary. It is pretty simple. Sound and prudent judgment based on a simple perception of the situation or facts. That's common sense right there, folks. Sound and prudent judgment based on a simple perception of the situation or facts. We're going to use some of that today, folks. We're going to apply some of that, but most importantly, we are going to apply the wisdom that we speak in a mystery. Going over to 2 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 2. Most importantly, however, though, save the best for last. 1 Corinthians 2, we also have to understand in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 that we speak wisdom in a mystery. 1 Corinthians 2, beginning in verse 6. We speak wisdom, however, among they that are full grown, yet a wisdom not of this world, nor of the rulers of this world, who are coming to nothing. But we speak Yahweh's wisdom in a mystery, even the wisdom that has been hidden. Wisdom that's been hidden. Understand that. Okay? Wisdom that has been hidden. Okay? Which Yahweh foreordained before the worlds to our glory, which none of the rulers of this world have known. For had they known it, they would not have impaled the sovereign of glory. Verse 9. But as it is written, things which I saw not, and which enter not, and things that ear heard not. Things that I saw not, and things that ear heard not. And which entered not into the heart of man. Whatever things Yahweh prepared for them that love him. But to us Yahweh revealed them through the Spirit. Okay? Through the Spirit. Not through modern scholarship. Not through context. No. Through the Spirit. Which is why when you see in the scriptures, let he who has an ear, let him hear, it is because it is speaking about something that must be discerned through the Spirit, not modern scholarship, not contextualization or proper context. No. That is not wisdom in the Spirit. Paul makes that very clear. We got to apply, number one, the wisdom that we speak in a mystery, which is hidden, which things that eye see not and ear hears not, which is why you'll see our Savior utter, let he who has an ear, let him hear, because it must be discerned in the Spirit. And we got to apply, to a lesser extent, common sense. Common sense, like our Savior when he jumps on Peter. Are you still without understanding? You're still without common sense, Peter. Okay? There is a combination of the two, but the greater portion of it is wisdom in the Spirit, wisdom in a mystery. Okay? You got to understand that. Now, with that being said and done, let's start off real quick. And I just want to remind you, we're going to start real quick with Mark 7 and Matthew 15. Okay? But first, in order to understand this washing of hands before you eat bread, that incident that takes place with our Savior, Yahshua the Messiah, his disciples, and the Pharisees, we got to understand, where did that come from? Where did that come from? When you go over to Exodus chapter 30, in Exodus chapter 30, verse 17, Exodus 30, verse 17, roughly 14 to 1500 years before the incident of washing your hands before you eat bread, when the Pharisees are questioning why our Savior's disciples are eating bread without washing their hands, which is a rabbinic law. We got to understand, where did they come up with that, because it's not in it's not in the law of Moses. Okay, where they got that from is from Exodus 30 verse 17. They took a law that is in the Bible and they expounded it to include people that it didn't go to. Let me repeat that. You'll see right now what is that. First, matter of fact, let me read it first and then I'm going to repeat that. Exodus 30 verse 17, and Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, you shall also make a laver of bronze. Who shall make a laver of bronze? Who? He's telling Moses, you shall make a laver of bronze, and the base of it of bronze, to wash at. And you shall put it between the tent of meeting and the altar. And you shall put water in it. And Aaron and his sons, who? Aaron and his sons, which are the Levites. Aaron and his sons, okay, shall wash their hands and their feet there. When they go into the tent of meeting, they shall wash with water, that they die not. Or when they come near to the altar to minister, to burn an offering made by fire to Yahweh. So they shall wash their hands and their feet, and they die not, that they die not. And it shall be a statute forever to them, even to him and to his seed throughout their generations. Okay? From that commandment, which goes to the Levites, okay, the Pharisees would later expand that to include all the Hebrews, okay, all the Jews, all the Hebrews. So 1400 years later, when the Pharisees are saying tradition of the elders, the rabbinic law that they formulated based off of that biblical law, understand that what they did was they took that law and they expanded it to include all the Jews, all the Hebrews, okay, not just the Levites. Yahshua rebukes that, because that's a law of man, even though they got that from the law of Moses. Okay? Now, again, understand the correlation right there. Because later on in Leviticus 11, when you see the clean food laws, Deuteronomy 14, it is for the children of Israel. It is for the children of Israel. Go over to Leviticus 11. In Leviticus chapter 11, this is what we find. Verse 1, and Yahweh spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying to them, speak to the children of Israel, not the whole planet, speak to the children of Israel, the 12 tribes which came out of the land of Egypt, saying, these are the living things which you may eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Okay? And then he goes on to give the clean food laws, clean, unclean. Also in Deuteronomy 14. He is addressing the children of Israel. Amos 3 will tell you, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. Okay? In Exodus 30, it is for the Levites, Aaron and his sons, throughout their generations. The Levites. Okay? Now, remember, common sense and wisdom that we speak in a mystery through the Spirit. Now, 1400 years later, now we're going to go to the story that's going on in Mark chapter 7, which is Mark's account, and then Matthew 15, which is Matthew's account of the same story. But before we do that, because this is involving ministers of the New Covenant, which I've tried to reach out through comments, but again, what started off, like I said in a video a while back, as their pastor Matthew used that term, love gives the benefit of the doubt, but at some point when the benefit of the doubt has been removed, you're still going to bring love, but you also got to bring a stern rebuke, and that's what this is, because he's blatantly ignoring the truth. He's flat out blatantly ignoring it now. So now, yeah, the benefit of the doubt has been removed. Yeah, in other words, I see what you're doing. No, there's people's lives involved here. This just goes beyond your pride and whatever. Seriously, that's not what this is about. So it's still done in love, but again, no. At some point, the Spirit shows, yeah, I see what you're trying to do, and it's. So with that being said and done, first, what I want to do is we're going to start off real quick and just listen to this 5-minute portion where their ministers of the New Covenant and their pastor Matthew is doing a review on the Dr. Douglas Hemp and Dr. R.L. Solberg debate on the dietary laws. I saw that debate live, commented on it as well. And I want you to hear what this pastor Matthew is good, this teacher of the law, is going to say, because it's going to lead later to nothing but hypocrisy and deception when he tries to help people that are genuinely commenting on his YouTube page, but he leads them astray with false teaching.
The saying, look, food. If food goes in you and your hands are not washed according to tradition, it doesn't change it.
They are talking about Mark chapter 7, guys. Remember, this right now, these fellows are talking about Mark chapter 7. The parallel passage is Matthew 15, Matthew's account, but they're dealing with Mark chapter 7, which is Mark's account of the washing of hands before you eat bread and that situation.
But he's not saying that pork is on the menu, at least not in my opinion. But
pork is not the subject of Mark 7. Oh, I know that Rob is going to say that it is. I think he's going to say that. It's not the subject. They're all Jews here talking. The subject is impurity. And Yeshua's telling them, look, if you don't keep the tradition of the elders, you ain't got to worry to death that there might be some kind of impurity on your hand, ritually. It's all right. The digestive system will purify it. You can look at Second Temple period texts, or at least texts based on Second Temple period practices, and it was looked upon in Judaism that feces was clean. It wasn't impure.
Now, I'll stop him right there. Notice how Matthew is bringing up Second Temple period Judaism, some of their practices and their belief systems of the Jews of that time period. This shows me that Matthew is intelligent enough, and he's a smart guy. He's my superior, I'll tell you that right now. I'm not afraid to say that. With that being said and done, he does show that he is cognizant and he is well aware of Second Temple period Judaism and their practices, their social mores, in other words, of that time. However, though, a little bit later, you're going to see his hypocrisy show in what I think flat out is a doctrine of demon. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, and I'm just saying that humbly because Paul identifies doctrines of demons, which are lies that are filled with hypocrisy. And what he's going to do in verbal gymnastics to try to explain his reasoning in Acts 10. But that leaven begins to leaven his theological lump right here. It's that fork in the road. It's that fork in the road. But this tells me he's right. What he's saying so far is right about the Second Temple period, Judaism and their demeanors. But you'll see later on how he's going to pull that little switcheroo.
Because the digestive system purified out any impurities that might have been ingested through the hands, through touching, through eating.
I would love to get your thoughts on that.
I think this is such an interesting, what would you call that, encounter, engagement, because it does start, like you said, we're talking about food, traditions of the elders, and he says in verse 8, you leave the commandments of God. That's a pretty strong language there, and cling to the commandments of men.
Think about that. Strong language. He rebukes them for violating the commandments. Is he then going to go on and teach that it's okay to violate the commandment? I've made the pig clean, the camel clean, the poison dart frog, it's all clean. Might as well just go ahead and make some poison oak soup too. Maybe some deadly nightshade soup. Maybe throw a few holly berries in there. Just eat it. If you can put it in your mouth as food, just pray over it.
Traditions of men, right?
Yeah.
He's saying you've left that all behind. So I think we're both in agreement on the context of that engagement, right? What I think is fascinating, though, is where Jesus took it from there. He didn't just stay at the level of food. Next thing you know, he's talking about sexual sin and all kinds of things that defile a person, right? And so I think it's really interesting that Jesus takes and he does.
Notice defile, make one impure. And he does say in Mark 7, specifically in Matthew 15, things that defile you come where? Just like the law says, from within. From out of a person's heart. But it's talking about impurity. The subject's still not the dietary law. The dietary law's nowhere to be found. I want to encourage you, read Paul Sloan's new book. I can't even remember the name of it
again,
now.
this is where I'll stop him again. He's wrong. Things that I saw not, and ear heard not. Okay? We speak of wisdom. We speak wisdom in a mystery. Okay, we don't need to go to Paul T. Sloan and the wisdom of men. No, this is where stick to the Messiah. We stick to the Messiah.
I'll put it up on the screen. But Paul Sloan wrote a new book talking about how that he believes that Jesus never taught against the law of Moses, that he's in perfect harmony with it. Excellent read, great read. Disagree with some of the final conclusions in Sloan's book, but when he's exegeting texts and the Gospels, it's beautiful.
I'm gonna stop right there with Matthew again. Let me just go real quick. I'm just gonna pull up on the Strong's. This is Mark 7. I'll read it out of my Bible. You go over to Mark chapter 7. Let's see. There we go. And Mark chapter 7, you can see here on the screen, and I want you to concentrate on verse 16, right here. Verse 16. All right. But we're going to start off with verse 14. Okay, we're going to start here at verse 14. You can see it here on the screen. Mark 7:14, and he called to him the multitude. Our Savior is calling the multitude, telling everybody, gather around, come here. And he says to them, hear me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing from outside the man that going into him can defile him. But the things which proceed out of the man are those that defile the man. If any man has ears to hear, let him hear. See that right there. Now, anytime you see that statement, folks, as you see in verse 16, our Savior is, after he says that statement, and again, I'll read it again, and he called it a multitude, picture that, and says to them, hear all of you and understand. There is nothing from outside the man. There is nothing, even a ham sandwich, from outside the man that going into him can defile him. But the things which proceed out of the man are those that defile the man. If any man has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, let's use common sense. Do the people that he's talking to have ears to hear? Of course they do. Of course they have ears to hear. But that's not what he means. When you see the term used by our Savior, if any man has ears to hear, let him hear, he is telling you that this is wisdom that is in a mystery. It is wisdom that is being spoken through the Spirit of Yahweh, not the contextualization of men or scholars. No. That's not what this is about. So when you have Matthew saying, the subject is not important. No. That Matthew does not have ears to hear. Sadly. He lacks those spiritual ears to hear. Because everything that he's going to say is about, you'll see in a minute, contextualization. It's a Jewish audience. No wisdom in the Spirit at all. This is why we're going to go back to 1 Corinthians 2:6. In order to understand what that means in verse 16, notice how he uses that expression. He's using that term. If any man has ears to hear, let him hear. That's the clue to send us over to 1 Corinthians 2:6. In 1 Corinthians 2:6, because we know obviously he doesn't mean physical ears. Everybody's got physical ears to hear. We know that. Okay? What he's talking about is wisdom in a mystery. So let's go over to 1 Corinthians 2. And Matthew knows this, but Matthew's just ignoring this. He's very, that's wisdom filled with partiality and hypocrisy. That's flat out what this is at this point. Now, again, now that we've removed all doubt, I see what we're dealing with here. No. 1 Corinthians 2:6. We speak wisdom, however, among they that are full grown, yet a wisdom not of this world, nor of the rulers of this world who are coming to nothing. Like the Pharisees, the Sanhedrin. Apparently they're not getting this. But we speak Yahweh's wisdom in a mystery, even the wisdom that has been hidden, That's why he says, if any man has ears to hear, let him hear. Because only those that are full grown are going to understand this is talking about Leviticus 11. Even the wisdom that has been hidden, which Yahweh foreordained before the worlds to our glory, which none of the rulers of this world have known. For had they known it, they would not have impelled the sovereign glory. Who impelled the sovereign glory? The people that know Leviticus 11 very well. Okay. But as it is written, things which I saw not and ear heard not, which is why our Savior is saying, let he who has ears to hear, let him hear. It's common sense, Matthew. It's common sense. Yet you're doing this review of Hamp and Solberg here, like with a chip on your shoulder. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. What do you understand what you're talking about? Go to 1 Timothy 1:5. You're confidently affirming, yet you don't know what you're talking about. No, there's a reason why verse 16 in Mark 7 is telling you that this has much more to do than what you think it does, sir. It's that simple. It's common sense. It's common sense.
he's just obviously the best teacher ever that has ever lived.
Amen.
He takes these concepts and he uses them to teach these bigger lessons. So it's a very specific issue, eating without washing your hands. And next thing you know, he's talking about what truly defiles a man.
Yep.
He's not talking about washing hands anymore.
That
He's
is
not
correct.
talking about that. He
Solberg's right.
on it, and he's showing why.
He is in Mark 7,
No, he's not.
verse 18 and 19. And he said to them,
By
"Are you
verse
lacking
18
a-"
and 19, he has moved off of the topic of washing your hands. This is why what Matthew's about to say, this is where he takes that wrong turn. Solberg's right. Solberg is right. Again, let's go over real quick. I'll pull it up here out of the Strongs. Matthew's saying by verse 18 and 19, our Savior is still talking about washing your hands before you eat bread. Wrong. He's already said in verse 16, if any man has ears to hear, let him hear. This is where Matthew missed the boat. Okay? This is where Matthew takes the wrong turn in the road. This is where we speak wisdom and a mystery amongst they that are full grown. And this is where we're going to apply a little bit of common sense. Because in verse 17 we see, and when he had entered into the house, the Pharisees are gone. He's already done with the Pharisees. The multitude is gone. He's now in this house from the people. His disciples asked him concerning the parable. Concerning, what did you mean by that? Because we heard you also say that he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Well, it's what he states in verse 14. And when he called all the multitude unto him, he said unto them, listen to me, every one of you, and understand that there is nothing from outside the man. There is nothing, even a ham sandwich, nothing from outside the man that entering into him can defile him. But the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile the man. If any man has ears to hear, let him hear. They're now asking, what does that mean? They're not asking about whether washing your hands before you eat bread defiles a man, because they already knew that. That's why they didn't wash their hands. I'll give you an example. In Acts chapter 10, if you're listening, Matthew, in Acts chapter 10, when Elohim tells Peter, rise, Peter, kill and eat. Why does Peter not rise and kill and eat? Because he already knows some of those animals are unclean. And Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14, the law says that we cannot eat those. Not so, master, for I've never eaten anything common or unclean. Right. That tells you Peter is already aware that we don't eat those animals, which is why he's not getting up to kill and eat those animals. That's called common sense, Matthew. So, in Mark chapter 7 and Matthew 15, I'll give you a visual. I'll give you a visual to help out. There we go. In both Mark's accounts and Matthew's account, we find in Mark's account, the Pharisees are asking, and there are gathered together to him the Pharisees and certain of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem. See them right here. This is just a pictorial representation. That's all this is. Of Joshua, Peter, the apostles. Okay, got the Pharisees and scribes over here. All right, picture that. And they had seen that some of his disciples ate their bread with the file that is unwashed hands. And the Pharisees and scribes asked him, why walk not your disciples according to the tradition of the elders, but they eat their bread with defiled hands? In Matthew's account, it's the same thing. The Pharisees coming from Jerusalem are asking, why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. What does this tell us? This tells us, just like in Acts chapter 10, that Peter and the fellas, the apostles, already understand, because they've been taught by Yahshua, that eating bread with unwashed hands does not defile a man. Otherwise, they would have washed their hands before they ate the bread. Just like Acts 10. Why is Peter telling Yahweh no? Because Peter already understands, and it comes out of Peter's mouth. Not so, Master, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean. Okay? Did Peter go and eat in the home of Gentiles? No. Not up until Cornelius. Because Elohim had showed him, as these guys like to hang their hat on. Okay, this is common sense. So, does Peter understand, at the moment the Pharisees bust them, that they're eating their food without washing their hands for the bread? They were always doing that before. That means that Peter and the disciples now understood. They already know, yeah, Yahshua told us that eating our bread without washing our hands, that doesn't defile a man. They are well aware of that. That's why they're not washing their hands for the bread. It's common sense, Matthew. It's common sense. Now, what you're about to do, and this is why Solberg's right, Yahshua's no longer talking about eating bread with unwashed hands. The fellas know that. What has spooked them is, what do you mean nothing outside the man? Whoa. That's like Solberg said, that's taking it further. That's expounding. That's, you just told us eating with unwashed hands, but nothing? What does that mean? Explain to us that parable. What does that mean? Now, in Matthew's account, what does Yahshua tell Peter? Are you still without understanding? Or do you lack common sense? Are you perplexed, Peter? Yeah. Wait a minute. Well, we know about the washing the hands thing. That's why we already know that. We were already exhibiting that. We were showing the audience, yeah, we get that part. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this other part that you talked about. Then you said that he who has ears to hear. Whoa. Are you saying a ham sandwich pork? Yeah, Matthew. Things that I saw not, and here, are you full grown, Matthew? I hate to talk to you this way right now, but again, I gotta, no. This is not a game, Matthew. This is not discernment. This is partiality. You're just picking and choosing what questions you want to answer as you throw the truth to the side. The Spirit has helped me discern that, sir. That's not how this works. Answer the question. Answer the question. Otherwise, stop teaching this to people and creating more gangrene. And that's exactly what you're doing. I love you. That doesn't change a thing. That has nothing to do with my attitude. This has to do with yours right now, sir. You're wrong. Okay? And so, and then you create these videos and you spread more of this gangrene. No, you're incorrect. So now what you're going to do is you're going to tell the audience, no, this still does have to do with, no, no, it does not. As a matter of fact, I'll give you one more visual representation of Mark. I have this color coded. Let's see if I, just to give you a better idea. And again, if you're a Christian out there, folks, I don't identify as a Christian. I just don't, because there's false doctrine they're teaching too. I'm no longer a Messianic. I was for 20 years of my youth, but we're all still members of the body of the Messiah. That's what I'm trying to stay focused. Hopefully, this will help some of y'all sharpen up your tools against these ministers of deceit. Now, this is in Matthew's account, but let me go real quick to Mark's account. Here you go. In Mark 7, it's the confrontation begins in Mark 7 with the Pharisees questioning Yahshua why his disciples are not eating bread. You see all that? Why they're eating bread with unwashed hands. This is all in the blue section. By the end of the blue section, which is the end of verse 13, the Pharisees are now out of the equation. That subject matter is done. This is where Solberg's right. This is where that washing of hands things gets cut off. Then when you get to the yellow portion, Yahshua calls everyone together. Again, Yahshua called the crowd to him and said, listen to me, everyone, and understand. This is where he now expounds on this and broadens it into the Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14, but without saying Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14. This is why he'll also say, let he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Because he's speaking in the Spirit, Matthew. Now, in verse 17 is when he rebukes his disciples. In Matthew 15, it's Peter specifically. Because they're not understanding the yellow portion. They understand the blue portion. They were already doing it before the Pharisees got there, Matthew. This is why what you're about to say in a moment it's a lack of common sense. Or you could say it's deception, however you want to take it. But this is where you're flat out wrong. Solberg's right. You're flat out wrong. And you need to reread that, sir, because, again, no, he's moved past that topic.
Understanding in this way as well. Do you not perceive that whatever goes into the man from outside cannot defile him?
Listen to what you just said. Whatever goes into a man. Did he say washing hands? No. Because he's moved past that subject, Matthew. You're saying it yourself. It just takes common sense, sir.
Make him impure. It's not talking about the dietary law here. Verse 19.
Wisdom and a mystery.
It does not go into his heart.
It's because
his stomach.
It's because you don't have the ears to hear. It's because you don't have your ears to hear, sir. It's that simple. You want to build that tabernacle for Moses, and you're not listening to the master. It's that simple. Read Matthew 17.
Goes to the sewer, katharizon pantata bromata, or katharizon pantata bromata, purging all meats. Even if it is masculine, the masculine reading, if that's the reading that is to be preferred, as a lot of the newer translations cite, it could still go back to the man, ton anthropon, at the end of verse 18, and the stomach of the man. See?
I think those Pharisees or scribes, or however they're described, he's showing how far off base they are, right? And I think he takes this opportunity, and when he says, thus he declares all food, bromata, clean, I think he means what he says, or actually I believe that's actually Mark's commentary later, not Jesus' words at the time.
I disagree. I think it's Yeshua's words at the time. I don't think it's Mark's commentary. And remember, culturally, everybody in the discussion in Mark 7 keeps the dietary regulations. And you really think pork is in any other mind?
I want to rewind what he said right there. Right. Again, this is just common sense.
Bromata, clean. I think he means what he says, or actually I believe that's actually Mark's commentary later, not Jesus' words at the time.
I disagree. I think it's Yeshua's words at the time. I don't think it's Mark.
Right there, I agree with Matthew. I also agree that it is Yahshua's words. Okay? It is the inspired text. Me and Matthew are in agreement on that. In other words, this is why his hypocrisy is going to show later on. He agrees that in portions of, and some Bibles that show Mark 7 where it says, and thus he declared all foods clean, Matthew is telling you flat out, he believes Yahshua did say that. I do too. I do too. Well, even if it's just Mark's commentary, it's still the inspired text. Either way. I personally, I think it's Mark's commentary. Let me correct myself. But he knows that Yahshua did say that. Okay? It's still inspired. In other words, me and Matthew are in agreement right there. However, though, this is where Matthew doesn't have his ears to hear. Listen to what he's going to say next.
Mark's commentary. And remember, culturally, everybody in the discussion in Mark 7 keeps the dietary regulations.
And he laughs about it. Listen to what he said. Everyone in Mark 7, the Pharisees, the disciples, Yahshua the Messiah, the audience in Mark 7 and Matthew 15, they all keep the dietary requirements of Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. They're all Jewish. Okay? And then he laughs about it. Yeah. That's now, this is where I'm gonna laugh back. Okay? Let's go over to Romans 3. Seriously, Matthew, I don't know if you're it's a lack of common sense. I don't know. I don't really know what it is. It's deception. It flat out. So let me just. I'm not gonna bust my head over trying to figure out. How can you not see this? Romans 3:27. Okay, Matthew. Did it occur to you that when Matthew is writing that, when Matthew and Mark are writing that account down, that they're writing it down because it's going to go to the Gentiles? Did that occur to you? You do know that more Gentiles, more are the children of the free woman, okay, than she that has a husband. You do know that, right? More Gentiles have read Matthew 15 and Mark 7 than Jews. You do know that, right? I think Matthew also was well aware of that, and Mark, when they wrote those accounts. So let's go over to Romans 3. Matthew's just like, in other words, this is that he doesn't have his ears to hear. You think Yahshua the Messiah is aware that this incident, when he says, everyone gather around, hear and understand, that Yahshua's aware that this incident is going to be recorded for the millions and millions and millions and millions of Gentiles out there that convert to me, that eat pork? Yeah. He's well aware of that, Matthew. He's well aware of that. You're just confined. I mean, seriously, buddy, listen to what you're mocking. Let's go over to Romans 3. Let's go over to Romans chapter 3. In Romans chapter 3, beginning in verse 27, where then is the glorying? It is excluded. By what manner of law? Of works? No, but by law of faith. We reckon therefore that a man is justified by faith apart from the works of the law. Or is Yahweh the Elohim of the Jews only, Matthew? Is Yahweh, when Yahshua the Messiah is declaring all foods clean, like you believe and I believe, did it occur to you that Yahshua is aware that Yahweh is also the Elohim of the Gentiles? Yes, Matthew. Yahshua is aware that, yep, Yahweh is also the Elohim of the Gentiles that eat their ham sandwiches, which is why he is using the term nothing outside of a man. Okay? Nothing outside of a man, like a ham sandwich that goes into his mouth, through his stomach, out the drought, can defile a man. Seriously, Matthew, I mean, I got to kind of laugh back here. Seriously, you do realize that Yahweh is also the Elohim of the Gentiles? Again, I hate to do this to you, buddy, but yeah, I'm just under orders, so I'm going to do it to help remove all doubt. Here's a map of the globe. The population of the planet Earth, at the time Yahshua the Messiah walked this earth 2,000 years ago, was roughly between 200 and 250 million people. Let me say that again. The population of this planet, when Yahshua the Messiah walked this earth 2,000 years ago, was roughly 200 to 250 million people. The population of Judea, can barely see it on this map. Barely see it in the map right there. Right about there. At the time Yahshua Messiah walked this earth was about 1 million people. Okay? 1 million people. The population of the planet, between 200 and 250 million people. So, if Yahshua the Messiah knows, Matthew, that his father is also the Elohim of the Gentiles, then do you have your ears to hear what he is saying? So what if the audience in Mark 7 is the 1 million people? What about the 249 million people out there, Matthew? Thus he declared all foods clean. Even you believe that. What's so funny? And then Peter's not going to get this. And then this is going to lead to your verbal gymnastics in a moment with Acts chapter 10. Now that we got that, now let's move on to Acts chapter 10. Now, as a reminder, folks, what you're about to see, and this is going to sadly lead to Acts 15, what you're about to see from Matthew is verbal gymnastics. Common sense is going to show you that Acts 10 can easily be understood by way of the Holy Spirit if you just didn't take that wrong turn of the road with Mark 7. In which case Matthew already believes Yahshua made all foods clean, but only foods that Jews identify as food. Only because Yahweh is only the Elohim of the Jew, not the Gentile. No, Matthew, that's not what Romans 3 tells us. So what's going to happen now, that little leaven's going to leaven this whole lump, that wrong turn of the road. Men that desire to be teachers of the law, they confidently affirm they know what they're saying, but they don't know what they're talking about. And you're going to watch the verbal gymnastics and the hypocrisy with some doctrines of demons thrown in come flying out. So, in Mark 10, after he does this Acts 10 video, he does another video because someone asked him a question, one that I even commented, but he just totally ignored me because he doesn't like to be confronted with the truth. And he does this video answering a question about Acts chapter 10. We're going to start off right here.
Watch what magnesium does to your bowels.
If you have to wipe more than 4 times after you poop, here's
Oh,
why.
these commercials.
Due to their proximity to the unclean animals.
Let's start right here.
Now,
There we go.
I recently made a short video teaching going over Acts chapter 10, the account of Cornelius, Peter's vision, and Peter later visiting the home of Cornelius. And I got a lot of feedback from the video, both good and bad, as is always the case. But one commenter who I think doesn't agree with my position, they took the time to write out some very thoughtful questions. I can discern that it came from their heart. So I love genuine questions, and I wanted to answer those in this additional follow-up video. So this commenter writes, Very interesting video. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. I have a couple questions. It says, you made the point that Peter's stated interpretation in verse 28 is the authoritative meaning of the vision, and that what Peter understood the voice to be saying about food doesn't carry the same weight because disciples misunderstand things. That's an interesting hermeneutical move. But here's what I want to ask you to sit with. If Peter's understanding of the vision can be set aside when it appears to touch the dietary law, on what basis do we then treat Peter's interpretation on verse 28 as the definitive and reliable meaning? You're leaning on Peter's authority in one place and setting it aside in another. How do you decide which of Peter's understandings to trust, and what is the textual principle that governs that decision? Again, such a well thought out question. When the vision was first given to Peter in Acts 10, 9 through 16, Peter sees this sheet with all kinds of animals like sheep, pig, cow, rat, dove, vulture, etc. He hears the heavenly voice say, rise or get up, kill, and eat. So this is an imperative. This is a commandment. Peter's response to the voice is, no, Lord, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean. Peter understands the voice to be the Lord. It could be a reference to either the Father or the Son. And he sees unclean animals as being unclean, but he sees the clean animals as being common because they are beside or next to the unclean animals. Now,
I'm going to stop him right there, folks, to help you understand what you're about to hear from him. To help you understand what, I'm not afraid to say this doctrine of demon that is going to come from Matthew, which is a lie filled with hypocrisy. I want you to keep this in mind as you listen to what he's going to say. Let me show you this visual real quick here. Okay. In this visual picture, we got Peter here. We got the blanket, the sheet coming down from heaven, from the four corners, with all types of four-footed animals, birds of the heavens, four-footed beasts, and creeping things. There is no mention, matter of fact, there's no mention of any amphibious creatures in here. In other words, any animals in the sea like fish, leviathan, like that, nope, not in here. These are all land and air animals. There's no water mentioned in this blanket anywhere. And in fact, there's no animals that need water or that live in water in this blanket. They're all land and air animals, clean and unclean, even though they're all clean, because Yahshua made them all clean. Okay, but just for argument's sake right now, according to Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14, there are clean and unclean beasts according to the law of Moses, but not under Yahshua, the Messiah's law, because he made all foods clean. It's that simple. All right. All this voice is going to tell Peter is arise, kill, and eat what is in this blanket. Now, what Mark is going to drive at, remember, like most of these Torah observant teachers do, is that this sheet that you see right here, folks, this sheet, Yahweh wants Peter to understand means people. This sheet full of four-footed beasts, land four-footed beasts, creeping things of the earth, no sea animals, and birds of the heaven. This means people. Okay? So Yahweh is going to tell Peter, remember, let's use our common sense and more specifically, wisdom in the mystery. Arise, kill, and eat. Now remember, in Matthew 15, Peter couldn't understand, well, what do you mean? Anything that goes in our mouth. Well, he wasn't talking no more about, remember, this is where that fork on the road begins. If you don't catch that, if you don't have your ears to hear, like Yahshua says, let he who has ears to hear, let him hear, then you're going to get the verbal gymnastics, the doctrines of demons come out of these Torah observant teachers that confidently affirm, teachers up, but they don't know what they're talking about. This is what Paul's talking about. This is what Paul's talking about in 1 Timothy 1:5. Okay? Now, as he continues to speak, notice how through his verbal gymnastics, he's going to try to sell you to think this sheet here refers to nothing but Gentile people. Okay? But the common animals in the sheet are the Gentiles Yahweh chose, but the unclean animals are the Gentiles that Yahweh didn't choose, which is ridiculous, and which Peter's going to show you in verse 28. How did you come to that conclusion, Matthew? It makes no sense what Matthew is about to tell you. I'm just warning you in advance, folks. I'm warning you in advance. Remember, Matthew is going to try to, through verbal gymnastics, make this sheet turn into all Gentile people, where the common animals are the clean Gentiles and the unclean animals are the unclean Gentiles that Yahweh didn't choose. That's where this is going to end up, which Peter's going to show you that's not even what that means. All this could be avoided if Matthew would just stick to the Master, Yahshua the Messiah. Colossians 2:8. Beware lest any man spoil you, which is why I'm doing this video. Matthew's about to spoil you with his vain philosophy, deceit, making up his own lies, you'll see in a minute, and not after the Messiah that made all foods clean. Peter has not gone. The Great Commission is 10 years ago. Peter, what are you waiting for? 10 years have gone by. 10 years have gone by, Peter. Go. And Peter's not going. There are people waiting out there to hear the word. It's all because he can't get a kosher meal outside of Judea. That's what this is all about. But watch how Matthew is going to terribly bring in his doctrines of demons.
Now, it is key to understand that the words common and unclean are not synonyms. The word common, koinos, in Greek, can refer to all types of things, not even related to food. Like if you and I have something in
Remember
common,
that.
or something that we...
He's telling you that the word common, which in the Greek is koinos, and the word unclean in the Greek, which is agathartos, those are not synonyms. And he's correct, they are not synonyms. Okay? But you're going to see his hypocrisy show. Remember, there's a commentator asking him this question. And you're going to see he's not going to answer the question. He's just going to solve doctrines of demons. This is what this comes out to. I hate to say it, but yeah.
we can fellowship over. You may reference the book of Titus, chapter 1, verse 4. Well, when it comes to food, there is a portion in Leviticus 11 that does teach that a clean animal can become inedible because it comes into contact with something unclean. This doesn't make the clean animal unclean in and of itself. It is the contact in particular with something unclean that causes the clean animal to be inedible. Leviticus 11:34a says in the HCSB, any edible food coming into contact with that unclean water, the water, by the way, that is used to wash an unclean vessel, Leviticus 11:31-32, will become unclean. Well, this is where the category of...
I'm going to stop him right there. Leviticus 11. Notice where he's going to. This is where the verbal gymnastics begin. Okay? He's taking you to Leviticus 11. We're going to start with verse 29. Leviticus, I'm going to back up to give this more context. Leviticus 11:29. And these are they which are unclean to you. among the creeping things that creep on the earth, the weasel, and the mouse, and the great lizard after its kind, and the gecko, and the land crocodile, and the lizard, and the sand lizard, and the chameleon. These are they which are unclean to you among all that creep. Whoever touches them when they are dead, not when they're alive, when they are dead, it says, shall be unclean until the evening. And on whatever any of them, when they are dead, not alive, when they are dead, shall be unclean until the evening. And on whatever any of them, when they are dead, falls on a plate, but they died and it falls on a plate, one of these animals, then that plate, okay, and it shall be unclean. Whether it is any vessel of wood or raiment, clothes, or skin, or sack, whatever vessel it is, and which any work is done, it must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the evening. Then shall it be clean. But remember, if it's dead, not if it's alive, if it's dead. Any and every earthen vessel into which any of them falls, whatever it is, it shall be unclean, and you shall break it. All food in it which may be eaten, that on which water comes, shall be unclean. Okay? How does the water become unclean? Is if one of these animals that are dead falls into that vessel, and then you pour water into that vessel, now that water is unclean because the vessel's unclean, because the dead animal, not the live animal, the dead animal fell into the vessel. That's how the water becomes unclean. That on which water comes shall be unclean. Okay? And all drink that you may be drunk in every such vessel shall be unclean. And everything on which any part of their carcass falls shall be unclean. Their carcass, because it's dead. Peter knows this. Peter's well aware of this. He's well aware of this. He's a Jew. He's well aware of this. And everything on which any part of their carcass falls shall be unclean, whether oven or range for pots. It shall be broken in pieces. They are unclean, and shall be unclean to you. Nevertheless, a fountain or a pit in which is a gathering of water shall be clean, but that which touches their carcass, again, because it's dead, a carcass means it's dead. It's common sense. Okay? Shall be unclean. It's clear cut. Now, what is Matthew doing? Let's see. Let's see what Matthew's doing. Let's look at the text. Let's look at the text. Search the scriptures. This is what it says. Peter's vision. The next day, as they went on their journey and drew near the city, Peter went up on the housetop and prayed about the 6th hour. Then he became very hungry and wanted to eat. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance and saw heaven open and an object like a great sheep bound at the four corners descending to him and let down on the earth. In it were all kinds of four-footed animals of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, and birds of the air. Do we see any mention of sea creatures? Any animals that live in water? No. Nope. Nowhere to be found in the text. And a voice came to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." Do we see any mention of water in this sheet? No, folks. There is no mention of water in this sheet. And the voice came to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." Because the text says, the voice says, kill. That means that these animals are alive in that sheet. It's called common sense, folks. But Peter said, not so. Now, let's go back to Matthew and watch these doctrines of demons come from him, which are lies, as he's going to bring up water. when there's no mention of water in the text anywhere, but he's forced to bring this in order to make his lie fit, as he hypocritically talks about the Christian who gets context wrong. That's what these are called, doctrines of demons, folks. I'm not afraid to say it. It doesn't matter how nice he appears. I'm saying right now, this is absolutely not.
Of a common animal originated. Lamb chops, for example, were a clean meal, but if some unclean water used to wash a dish that, let's say, a dead rat had dropped into, that came into contact with the lamb chops were not to be eaten. Not because lamb in and of itself was off limits, but because the unclean water was off limits.
No water in the blanket.
So Peter views even the clean animals in the sheet as common due to their close proximity to the unclean animals. So they're likely bumping into each other inside the sheet.
And that's where your lie is. What he's telling you is that Peter tells Yahweh no, because he sees that blanket has animals that are unclean in it and animals that are clean in it. But because but they're all alive. That's why the voice is telling him kill and eat. If there were dead animals in that blanket, the voice wouldn't tell him to kill. That's called common sense. Okay? It's called context. And it's the wisdom we speak in the mystery, because Yahshua declared all foods clean. Peter is not going, and he's not doing the Great Commission because he can't get a kosher meal outside of Judea. Okay? Are you still without understanding? It's that simple. Now, getting back to the text. Okay? Peter, what Matthew is stating is Peter, because he sees the unclean animals standing and rubbing up against the clean animals, they're all alive, that the clean animals are common because of that. That's where he's flat out lying to you, folks. That is a flat out lie. Now, like I said earlier in this video, he showed when he's reviewing Solberg and Hemp that he's well aware of customs of Second Temple period Judaism. He's well aware of first century Jews and their traditions and what was going on. Folks, let me show you right here why that's a lie. Let's back up here. In the first century, when Peter was walking this earth, at the time of Acts 10, folks, I'm here to tell you, there was no such tradition or law. Even Peter would laugh and be like, wait a minute, what? No, first century Jews, folks, did not believe that a live, clean animal became unclean or common or ritually defiled simply because it was touched by a live, unclean animal. Okay? According to biblical and Second Temple era purity traditions, ritual impurity from animals was strictly transmitted through the carcass. Through the carcass, like we just read. But Matthew hypocritically twists this with his doctrine of demon. I've just got to call it the way it is now. Of an unclean animal, not through contact between live animals. Furthermore, a living clean animal like a cow or a sheep was not susceptible to becoming a carrier of ritual impurity just by brushing against a live pig or a dog, folks. You could also feel free to Google up this article from Dr. Eve Levavi Feinstein. Okay, from the Torah.com, the animal laws before kashrut, a system of purity. Feel free to again that's going to break it down for you as well. Show you there was no such thing or belief system during Second Temple period Judaism that stated that. Let me go to another source. This is also from out of Arizona Methodist Church. Okay, you can see right here, the question was asked during our study of Leviticus 11, in which we learned that some animals are unclean and things that touch unclean things are unclean. So how can John the Baptist ever have been richly clean while wearing a leather belt around his waist? How can wine in a wineskin be suitable for human consumption? Okay, so he's going to explain right here. It turns out that I was mistaken in saying originally that only clean animals may be touched. The carcass of unclean animals will make a person or anything else that touches them unclean, although not permanently. The carcass of a clean animal that is mauled to death by a predator or that dies of disease or of old age is also unclean. However, as near as I can now tell, living unclean animals, there's the key, living unclean animals, in other words, donkeys, may be touched without incurring uncleanness. And the body of a clean animal that is properly slaughtered, that is in such a way that all the blood is spilled out, is clean. All right. If you like another witness, you can see this is from Miodea. All right. Does the Oral Torah have a law against common animals? Notice this question, folks. I'm a Christian who is researching how other religions influence Christianity throughout its history. This person here, this Christian, eventually has run into people like Matthew that come up with this doctrine of demon, this lie. Having found that some of my fellow believers in the Hebrew roots movement hold the belief that Acts 10, Peter's vision, references a rabbinic law in which no clean animals can have interactions with unclean animals without themselves becoming unclean. I decided to look a bit deeper. I could not find any oral Torah law, because there is none, that states this. And the proponents of this theory do not provide one themselves. Matthew doesn't. Matthew comes up with water that's not even in the blanket. It's doctrines of demons is what because they don't want to admit they're wrong. I am not an expert in the Talmud or any previous writings of a similar nature, so I wanted to ask if a law like this existed at least during the 1st century that I have just not heard about. The answer coming from Miodea, you have to define your terms better, but a live kosher animal, let's say a cow, remains kosher even if it touches a pig. Whatever you're describing doesn't ring any bells because it didn't exist. It did not exist, folks. So now you got Matthew here lying, okay, and telling you folks that that's what Peter was thinking. That's what Peter was thinking. Wrong. Folks, no such concept in 1st century Judaism existed. It's not there. It's not in the Torah, not even in rabbinic law. Peter, if you were to go back in time and ask Peter, is that true? Peter would be like, what are you talking about? No. Acts 10, the voice tells Peter to rise, kill, and eat. Peter sees that all the animals are alive. Peter knows, like I just showed you, the only way for the clean animals in that blanket to become common is if I kill the unclean animals. Now we got carcasses. Now we got dead bodies. Understand? That's where the law comes in. Then that would make the clean animals common, because the voice told Peter to kill and eat. Yet Matthew won't even bring that up. He'll laugh at Solberg. He'll laugh at him. And right now, I mean, seriously, Matthew, what are you doing? What are you doing? How could you laugh at Solberg when what you're doing? Seriously, what kind of stunt is this, Matthew? What kind of stunt is this? You're making up your own history line here. That's not what Peter's thinking. That is not what Peter's thinking at all. You just want to twist this to make it fit your theology. No, sir, that's a doctrine of demon. That's not what Yahshua the Messiah taught. That's what the Pharisees did. That's what the Pharisees did. You want to twist this. Okay? No. Sorry, sir, not on my watch. You're wrong. Show us where in First Temple or Second Temple period Judaism, where they had a belief system that believed if a cat rubs up against a cow, that the cow is now common. Show us something. Give me some witnesses. Nothing. Absolutely. You're going to add that to the text. No, absolutely not.
Peter's immediate response, like any faithful Israelite, is that he will not eat something that is forbidden in the Torah.
Was that Abraham's response? Like any faithful Israelite? No. Was that Abraham's response when Yahweh told him to go kill Isaac? No, that's a faithful Israelite. No, absolutely not. No.
But the voice responds by saying, "What God has made clean, do not call common." Now that's from the English Standard Version. The ERV gets the meaning nicely by reading this. God has made these things pure. Don't say they are unfit to eat. Now notice, as I mentioned in my former video teaching, the response by the voice does not use the word unclean, akathartos, in Greek. It only uses the word common, koinos. The voice's response shows that the initial command to rise, kill, and eat was a command to eat the clean animals in the sheet, the ones Peter viewed as common due to their proximity to the unclean animals.
Now, I'm going to stop them right there, folks, and show you why this is a doctrine of demon. What he's telling you right now, let's go over to Acts 10. What he's telling you right now is this. Peter is wrong. Peter is wrong. Right here. But Peter said, "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything common." Notice the word is koinos, number 2839 in the Greek. Koinos. I have never eaten anything common or unclean. Oops, that's unclean is number 169 in the Greek. Number 169 in the Greek, akathartos. Okay? This is what Peter is wrong. Why is Peter wrong? Matthew's going to state, well, because the voice doesn't use akathartos. The voice only says common. And the voice said unto him again the second time, what God has cleansed, that call not common. When we Google that, we see, yep, it's just the word koino. Okay. We don't see akathartos. All we see where it says, what the second time, what Elohim has cleansed, do not call common. This was done 3 times. And the vessel was received up into heaven. Now notice how it's worded. Notice how it's worded, folks. Now, what that means is this, folks. That means the sheet comes down. Animals, they're all alive, clean and unclean. Even though they're all clean. Because he made all foods clean. Remember, this goes back to the fork in the road in Mark 7. Alright? Now, Peter is also ignoring the Great Commission. He was told to go. He was told to go. Not going. This is what this is all about. Alright? Now, with all that being said and done, the voice tells Peter the first time, arise, Peter, kill and eat. The reason why Peter says not so is because Peter never understood in Mark 7 that all foods are now clean. Just like Matthew confirmed, he believes Yahshua said that. I believe Yahshua said that too. There's your answer. That's why Peter's not going to all the nations. Also, Isaiah 65, 24, 25 tells you the interpretation of this vision. But again, we'll just hold off on that for a minute. Now, when Peter tells, let's just go right back to the Strongs. When Peter tells the voice from heaven, when he tells Yahweh, not so, for I've never eaten anything common or unclean. Notice it says, and the voice spoke unto him again the second time. What Yahweh has cleansed, that call not common. This was done 3 times. And the vessel was received up into heaven. What that's telling us when it says a second time, this is how it went. Arise, Peter, kill and eat. Not so, Master, for I've never eaten anything common or unclean. The second time. Arise, Peter, kill and eat. What I have cleansed, you do not call common. That's why it's worded a second time. Because it's reiterating the point that the voice is still telling him to get up, kill and eat. Then you see it says this was done 3 times. And when you go into the Greek, you realize that the way it's worded, the voice is going to tell him after that second time, what I have cleansed, you do not call common. Then it's going to tell him again, arise, Peter, kill and eat. Peter's not getting up. He's not killing and he's not eating. Okay? That's what we know. All right? Now, the question is, what Matthew's Bible is saying, well, since the voice didn't say unclean, agathartos, it only said koinos. Now, remember, in Mark 7, if Yahshua declared all foods clean, then why would the voice call the food unclean? No. He's not going to call something unclean if he's already declared it clean. That's why the voice doesn't use agathartos. All you got to do, Matthew, is go back to what came out of your mouth in Mark 7. See how simple this is? It is that simple. But instead, because you have this preconceived idea, you're going to do this verbal gymnastics, you're going to make up rabbinic laws that didn't even exist just to make your theology fit as you laugh at Solberg. Seriously, nothing but doctrines of demons. No, you're wrong.
Now, people who read this text with the idea already in their mind that we have freedom in Christ to break the dietary law, they read it as God saying that he has made something that was unclean now clean. He's cleansed something that wasn't clean. But that's not what the voice means here.
Let he who has ears to hear, let him hear. No, Matthew, you did. You didn't have your ears on, buddy.
Clean, Acts 10:14a, refers to God making certain animals clean in the original creation. That is declared to us as such in both Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. Now, this is an area where there must be a paradigm shift for Christians. They are beginning with their conclusion, and then they read that conclusion back into the vision. Like
you're doing, sir. Like you're hypocritically doing yourself the same thing. Doctrines of demons. Like a hypocrite, Matthew. I don't mean that, just like a hypocrite. That's exactly what you're doing, sir.
When we start at the front of the book, noticing the clean and unclean designations, even in Genesis chapter 7, we know that some animals God has made clean. It is those animals that Peter was not to call common, just because they stood next to unclean animals. So you got to have that paradigm shift here. Start from the
Okay, now, like I showed you earlier, folks, so it was those animals. In other words, these animals right here, the clean animals, these are the animals that the voice is telling Peter, do not call common. Okay? So my question to you, Matthew, is, okay, what about these animals here? Remember, at the end of the day, you're going to say all of these are Gentiles. Okay, so what about these animals, Matthew? What about these Gentiles right here, Matthew? I'm showing you how what you're saying makes no sense at all. And Peter's going to refute your own words in a moment.
beginning, read forward. Where in the Torah now does it say that a sheep standing next to a pig is to be considered common?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
Right.
It's not in there.
Where in rabbinic law, Matthew? Where in rabbinic law? Where in rabbinic law? In first century Judaism, in second temple period Judaism, where is there a rabbinic tradition that a cat rubbing up against a cow makes the cow common? Nowhere, Matthew. You just made that up yourself. You're just lying about that. I already showed you there's nowhere we can find that. Yet you're going to put that into the text so that you can continue with this doctrine of demon. Seriously. Seriously. This is what 1 Timothy 1:5 is all about.
This is what the voice's response is trying to get across to Peter. What God has made clean, do not call common. Now, our commenter asked why I would set aside Peter's initial response as incorrect. Well, it is because of, one, the voice's response in only using the word koinos, and two, it's because when Peter woke up from his visionary state, he was perplexed himself at what the vision he had seen really meant. Now, it's here that I'm always amazed when Christian people act like the vision is so clear in saying Peter could eat pig or rat or dog. Once Peter pondered on it, he knew he had missed something. The HCSB says he was deeply perplexed. The Bible in Basic English renders this, Acts 10:17, as, now while Peter was in doubt as to the purpose of the vision. We can know from these two reasons that Peter initially misunderstood the voice in thinking that he was being told to eat an unclean animal. How then can we know, as our good commenter asked, that Peter's later understanding is correct? Well, first, we know by the context from Acts 10:18 all the way to verse 28. The vision took place 3 times, Acts 10:16, and then in Acts 10:19, while Peter was thinking about the vision, 3 men sent by Cornelius came looking for Peter. The Spirit of Yahweh then told Peter, get up, go downstairs and accompany them, that is the 3 men, with no doubts at all, because I have sent them. See, Yahweh is showing Peter beginning here what the vision meant. The 3 times of the vision correlates to the 3 messengers sent by, yes, Cornelius, but ultimately sent by the Spirit of Yahweh. Now, in verse 22, these men explained that Cornelius had sent them, explaining it to Peter. They described Cornelius to Peter as a centurion. They also said he was upright, he was a God-fearing man, and he has a good reputation with the whole Jewish nation. Now, does that sound like someone who is unclean to you? No way. But he would be considered common by some of the Jews who still had prejudice in their heart due to him not being a Jew, that is, being uncircumcised. I'll get to that here in just a bit. The men then tell Peter that Cornelius was divinely directed by a holy angel to call Peter to his house so that he could hear a message from Peter. Now, do you see anything here about eating pork? I sure don't.
I didn't see anything about water either. But yet you added that in. Again, how does that work? Hypocrisy is not wisdom from above, sir.
It blows my mind that someone could think that is the purpose of the vision given to Peter if they just read the entire chapter. But even if they just slow down and properly read verses 9 through 16 about the vision alone, they wouldn't get that understanding either.
Okay, well let me read that vision alone. Let's see. Let me look at that one more time. Maybe I'm missing something. The next day, as they went on their journey and drew near the city, Peter went up on the housetop and prayed about the 6th hour. Then he became very hungry and wanted to eat. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance and saw heaven open and an object like a great sheet bound at the 4 corners descending to him and let down to the earth. In it were all kinds of 4-footed animals of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, and birds of the air. And a voice came to him, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything koinos or agathartos, common or unclean." And a voice spoke to him a second time, "What God has cleansed, you must not call common, koinos." This was done 3 times, and the object was taken up into heaven again. Okay? And as you stated, because the voice doesn't say agathartos, it only says koinos. That's the kicker. That's why Peter's assessment at first is incorrect. Because Peter says koinos or agathartos. No. It's just koinos. Okay? That's okay. I see what you're saying so far. Now.
So Peter, after receiving the vision from the Lord and having these 3 messengers then tell him what they told him, he travels to visit with Cornelius. Cornelius is excited, he's ready, he's anticipating the visit. He goes ahead and he calls over his relatives and his close friends. Peter gets there, he talks with Cornelius and probably some of the others, and then Peter says in verse 28, the verse that we all know well, "You know it's forbidden for a Jewish man to associate with or visit a foreigner." Now that would be traditionally forbidden, not forbidden in the Torah. There are many cases where the ger or the foreign resident is not to be looked down upon. But in Second Temple period Judaism, it had came to be a law based upon tradition that developed, yes, out of the written Torah, but yet associated to the written Torah, that they would not associate with or visit, go even into the house of a Gentile. Peter says, "But the Almighty has shown me that I must not call any person common or unclean." That's why I came with that without any objection when I was sent for. "So I ask you," Peter says to Cornelius, "why did you send for me?" Now this is after Peter had been pondering on the vision, and after 3 men showed up at his house and told him that Cornelius, a God-fearing Gentile, had claimed to have had a visitation from a holy angel.
Now, let's back up here for a moment.
A Gentile.
So, right here, Matthew, verse 28, Peter said to them, "You know it's forbidden for a Jewish man to associate with or visit a foreigner. But God has shown me that I must not call any person koinos or agathartos." Seriously. Yet this is the correct interpretation. And here's Peter telling you that the voice did show him not to call any man agathartos. Look. Wow. Your commenter is asking you, why is this portion, why is Peter wrong when Peter says, not so, for I have never eaten anything common or unclean. When it's dealing with Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, you're quick, Matthew, to twist this bad by saying, well, the reason why Peter's incorrect here is because it says koinos or agathartos, but the voice only says koinos. The voice doesn't mention agathartos. Okay? That's what you just said, Matthew. Now, over here, this is the correct interpretation, where Peter is clearly showing us, but God has shown me that I must not call any person koinos or agathartos. Matthew, hello. Seriously, you're going to talk about Christians? It baffles you when Christians say that. Seriously, Matthew, take that speck out of your eye first before you start talking about Christians or talking about sober. But seriously, buddy, what are you doing? The text is, as a matter of fact, let's go to the Strongs. Let's go to the Strongs. Let me try this another way. Even though at this point I'm being generous here, I really am, because what this is pride. You only choose what questions you want to answer, and the ones that you know show you're wrong. You play this little game, and that's disappointing to see. Your commenter is asking if Peter's understanding of the vision can be set aside when it appears to touch dietary law. Okay? What your commenter is saying that you're doing is when Peter says, not so, Master, for I've never eaten anything koinos or agathartos. You brush that aside. On what basis do we then treat Peter's interpretation on verse 28 as the definitive and reliable meaning, where Peter says koinos and agathartos? You're leaning on Peter's authority in one place, Matthew. That's also what your commentator's asking you, Matthew. You're leaning on Peter's authority in one place and setting it aside in another. How do you decide which of Peter's understanding to trust, and what is the textual principle that governs that decision? What is your response? Well, because the voice only said koinos. But Peter says that the voice showed him koinos and agathartos, which are not synonyms. And Peter knows that too, Matthew. Peter's well aware that koinos and agathartos are not synonyms. So, what Matthew, huh? And you talk about sober, you laugh at Solberg. Seriously, what are you doing? No, Matthew, I mean, let's go to the Strongs. Let's go to the Strongs. At this point, my hope is to help those out there not fall for Matthew's deceit, because Matthew said, like I said, he's already shown me a little bit of his true colors. He's playing a game, and that's just flat out what it is, folks. I mean, at first I gave him the benefit of the doubt, but now you can tell he just picks and chooses what he wants to hear. But Peter said, not so, for I have not eaten anything that is, let me click on that, koinos or agathartos, 169. There it is. And so what Matthew is stating is, well, no, Peter's wrong on that account. Why is Peter wrong? Well, the reason why Peter's wrong is because the voice only uses koinos, but does not tell Peter to kill and eat agathartos. Only the common animals. And upon looking about that, I see what his point is. What he's not telling you is there's nothing unclean in the blanket, because what Elohim has cleansed in Mark 7, and you couldn't get it. This is why you were rebuked by Yahshua in Matthew 15. Are you still without understanding, Peter? Let he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Yeah, that's what this is all about. It's so simple. It is so simple. Call not common. So right here, this is the reason why this interpretation is wrong, because he only says koinos. So when you get to verse 28, folks, what is Peter telling you? But God has showed me that I should not call any man koinos or agathartos. Oh, and this is the correct interpretation. This is the correct interpretation. Peter is flat out there it is, agathartos. Peter is telling you in the verse that you hang your hat on, that Elohim did show him agathartos. Let me repeat that. In the verse that you hang your hat on, Matthew, Peter is telling you that I should call no man, all, including the heathens, koinos or agathartos. And here you are saying that, seriously, Matthew, seriously, let's go to Strong's again. Let me look at this in the Strong's one more time. Verse 28. But God has showed me that I should not call any man. What does this word any mean? Number 3367. Medais. Number 3367. Including the irregular feminine Media and the neuter when it comes to Greek, from 3361 and 1520, not even one man, not even one woman, any man, anything, no man, none, not at all, nothing, without delay, nobody, no one, nothing. Peter is saying that the voice told him, Elohim told him not to call any Gentile common or unclean, koinos or agathartos. So I'm astonished. Wow. Let's go right back. Let's go right back to Peter's vision. I mean, folks, I hope I'm seriously, my prayer is that this reaches a lot of innocent people out there, and it cautions you to stay away from ministers like Matthew that are doing this. Again, like I started this video with, listen to what Matthew is saying. Listen to what Peter is saying. In verse 28, Peter is saying, and by the way, Peter is incorrect in verse 28. He is incorrect in verse 28. All right? Now, but right now we're sticking with what Matthew's false teaching is. What Matthew's trying to sell you on is that Yahweh's trying to get Peter to understand these are Gentiles. These animals here on the left, which are clean animals, these are good Gentiles. These are clean Gentiles. These are Gentiles like Cornelius. These Gentiles over here, which are unclean animals, these are heathens. These are bad Gentiles. These are Gentiles that are not good Gentiles like Cornelius. They're not so good Gentiles like Cornelius. Okay? Peter thinks, you want me to kill and eat these animals here? Well, yep, that's exactly which is really what Yahweh was trying to get Peter to understand. Because he blows it in Mark 7 and Matthew 15, which the text clearly shows us. But again, Matthew wants to play verbal gymnastics because they got these Torah observant teachers. They desire to be teachers of the law. They confidently affirm they know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. So, what does Peter say in verse 28? That God has showed me that I should call no man, no woman, no Gentile, no animal, koinos or agathartos. And what did you say, Matthew? They are not synonyms. That's right. Peter knows that too, Matthew. Peter knows they're not synonyms. But now, Matthew, what is he doing? Well, see, Cornelius is a devout man. See, he's righteous. He's not to be called common. But those animals that are unclean, those are heathen Gentiles. No. Even Peter is admitting, no man, no Gentile is to be called koinos or agathartos. So all that did, Matthew, was confirm that Peter was to kill and eat the unclean animal, sir. This is a false doctrine that you put out on a lot of your debates. I see that you're on these panels and you're spreading that gangrene, Matthew. That's why I'm doing these videos. You are dead wrong. Your own interpretation blows up by just reading what Peter said in verse 28. If Elohim showed Peter not to call no man, not even one, koinos or agathartos, then my question that you keep avoiding, where does Yahweh show Peter not to call any man agathartos? Like Peter says in verse 28, that Elohim showed him not to call any man agathartos. Well, you got to go back to the vision that had clean and unclean animals. But you always, I notice in your on other videos, you like to throw out, well, first of all, Elohim never said to eat anything unclean. What? Because there's nothing unclean in the blanket, Matthew, because he made all foods clean, sir. Something you even believe yourself. Seriously. Now, again, just to shorten up this video, again, if it just, again, I'll finish up right here, Acts 10:28. But for out of the Strongs, Matthew, but Elohim has showed me that I should call any man, that word, Matthew, in the Greek, nobody, heathen, unheathen, a very righteous Cornelius, a very unrighteous Nero, it doesn't matter. Nobody. Okay? That's what Peter is. All I'm saying, I'm not saying I agree with Peter. I'm saying I'm showing you the doctrine of demon from your own theology. If Elohim showed Peter not to call any man, whether they're heathen or Gentile or whatever confusion you want to bring to this table, Matthew, koinos or agathartos, and then you're on these videos telling people, well, he never told them to eat from the unclean animals. Well, apparently what Peter's saying, no, he did tell them to eat the unclean animals, which is exactly what kill and eat is all about. Yeah, that is, in other words, you're contradicting yourself, sir. You're contradicting yourself, because Peter is telling you he did say agathartos. Well, Matthew, are we just gonna, what does the Spirit tell you here? What does the Spirit tell you here? You know, when Paul got in Peter's face, did Peter pull the kind of number you do? Well, the Spirit tells me that Paul's being genuine. No, sometimes you got to be a little bit, and that's what I'm doing. I love you, buddy, but you're wrong. What kind of game are you playing here, Matthew? What kind of game are you playing? And not only that, begin to shorten this video up. You're going to continue on. Fast forward right here.
Peter then preaches in verses 36 through 43 about Yeshua of Nazareth. And while Peter is still speaking his message, we get our final witness that Peter is now understanding the vision properly. And that is this: the Holy Spirit came down upon Cornelius, his relatives, and his close friends. All those who heard Peter's message, the text tells us in verse 44. The circumcised believers in Yeshua were amazed because the same gift that was given to the apostles in Acts 2, the gift of languages, was now being poured out on the Gentiles in Acts 10. This is heavenly confirmation that Peter's current understanding of the vision was the correct understanding. Peter then baptized Cornelius into the Messiah. He stayed there for a few days. And then finally, at the beginning of Acts chapter 11, it's recorded that Peter goes to Jerusalem, and there were some Messianic brethren there, ones who stressed physical circumcision, that Gentile converts must be circumcised in the flesh for salvation. You can reference Acts 15, verse 1.
Right. So, right here in your notes, you show us, and you just said Acts 15:1, and you're going to do a video. You already did that video where you're going to mislead this poor person, this poor commenter, down a darker road with nothing but doctrines of demons. This is why this stuff spreads like gangrene. You're already admitting that the guys in Acts 11, verses 1 through 3, are the same guys in Acts 15:1. You just said that. And I could just see right here with your pen that you're verifying these are the same guys in Galatians 2:11 through 13. Okay? Now, to pull up that visual, this is where I'll finish up here. To pull up that visual, to help the audience understand how you're going to pull another doctrine or demon out. This is why this stuff just spreads like gangrene. It really does. Excuse my passion on it, because what gets me is guys like Matthew blatantly ignore. They blatantly ignore when you put this stuff and you try. You know it's still being done in the right way. But you know I'm a nice guy. I really am. But when I see through the Spirit these people are just those deceivers out there, that's what gets me, because I care. I genuinely do care. To show you a visual, folks, you got Peter over here. You got the men from James, the men of the circumcision. Real quickly again. These guys that Matthew is talking about, which are the same ones in Acts 15:1 and Galatians 2:11-13. All right. Those are these fellows right here. These are the believing Jews of the circumcision in Jerusalem. They have a problem with Peter because they heard that Peter went to the Gentiles and they're uncircumcised, Cornelius. They confront Peter in Acts 11:2-3. All right. Matthew is telling you Matthew is teaching you right now correctly. Yep, Peter's going to park them by saying, hold on, I have this vision in Joppa, and this is what it meant, even though that's not what it meant. That's only half of what it meant. Peter got it half right, half wrong. And now he's going to tell them incorrectly that it's okay to go eat with the Gentiles so long as everyone's keeping kosher. And then they're going to glorify Yahweh, and they're going to hold their peace from it. They're going to, yeah, you're right, Peter, brother. Good job, Peter. Good job. They're now on Peter's side as of Acts 11. That's exactly what Matthew is saying right now, folks.
They got upset with Peter, and they said this: you visited uncircumcised men, speaking of Cornelius and his house, and you ate with him. Now, eating with uncircumcised men does not equal, as some purport, that Peter and his new friends all ate ham sandwiches. No, eating with them here means fellowshipping with them. It is almost an absolute that Cornelius' description in Acts 10 verses 2 and 22 shows that he himself observed the dietary regulations given to the Israelites. But on the slim chance that he may have not, he had far too much respect for the Jewish nation to try to serve Peter pork. Those who stressed circumcision, they were upset due to their own prejudice that Peter had just received deliverance from at the end of Acts 10. Now, what's so wonderful is that Peter relayed to these men what had happened in Acts 11, 4 through 17, and they became silent. They no longer got upset with Peter, but in this amazing event, these men were immediately delivered from their prejudice, just as Peter had.
You heard what he's saying. That's what I wanted that there. So, like he said, these men here, when they heard what Peter said incorrectly, they were delivered from their prejudice, which is why they glorified Yahweh. Peter was delivered from his prejudice. They're all on the same side now. They both understand that it's okay to eat with the Gentile newbies so long as everyone is keeping kosher. Right, Pete? Right. So now they've been delivered from their prejudice. There's no more pressure. He's been delivered from his prejudice. No more pressure. They're all on the same side. Okay? That's just what Matthew said.
They said in Acts 11:18, so the Almighty has granted repentance resulting in life to even the Gentiles.
Right. Now, here's your problem, and this is where we'll finish up here. But 6 years later, what do we find in Galatians 2? And remember, Matthew already showed in his Bible, he knows that these are the same guys in Galatians 2, 11, 13. He had it marked in his Bible. Okay? But when Peter came to Antioch, this is 6 years down the road, folks, I resisted him to his face. Paul's resisting Peter to his face because he stood condemned. For before that certain came from James, these fellows, remember these fellows right here? Remember them? They were delivered of their prejudice, just like Peter. Isn't that beautiful, Matthew? They were both delivered of their prejudice, right? Because he stood condemned. For before that certain came from James, men from Acts 11:18, he ate with Gentiles. But when they came, these guys here, he drew back and separated himself, fearing them that were of the circumcision. And the rest of the Jews dissembled likewise with him, so much that even Barnabas was carried away with their hypocrisy. Matthew, can you please explain to me what on earth that's about, sir, based off of what you're teaching? Please explain to me why Peter and the other Jews are behaving that way just because the guys from Acts 11 who were delivered of their prejudice show up. Can you please tell me what that's all about? Well, let's go to your sermon here in part 14 of Galatians. And here's where the doctrines of demons come flying out.
Paul is getting onto them about. Now, Peter was one of the elders that agreed with Paul's gospel to the Gentiles. But here in our text today, we see that Peter, among others, gave in to peer pressure.
He gave in to peer pressure.
Arose and Paul rebuked him openly and publicly.
He gave in to peer pressure. He gave in. He just said they were delivered from their prejudice, and he was delivered from their. Isn't that beautiful? They're all delivered from their prejudice. All that has just been, and now, what peer pressure? What peer pressure, Matthew? What pressure is there? If Acts 11 is telling you their contention with Peter was that he ate with uncircumcised men, and after the end of Peter explaining what his vision didn't mean, but they're going off what Peter said. Whatever Peter told them, it satisfied their contention, right? Like you said, they were delivered from that. What pressure? So how is there pressure just because they showed up? Unless Titus is eating that ham sandwich. Unless Titus is eating a ham sandwich. Oops. But I told him the vision had nothing to do with food. Right. Right. I love you, Matthew. You're wrong, sir. You need to get these doctrines of demons out of here. This is not common sense. This is not wisdom that we speak in the mystery. This is a flat-out denial of the authority of Yahshua the Messiah, sir. You need to stop laughing at Solberg. Believe me, I'm not always. Believe me, there's things I disagree with Solberg too. Oh, trust me. But you need to stop doing a little bit less of that and start getting, No, sir. Stop spreading this gangrene. You're wrong. Love you, folks. Yahweh bless you. We'll talk again very soon.